Hey gang, Lou here from Jersey Shore Fabricators. It's another Mustang. 98 Mustang GT 4.6 rotted frame rail. Let's see how we fix it, grab a cup of coffee and hang out. Alright, so what do we got going on? Well, this car had the brake proportioning valve go bad on it. It was leaking brake fluid on it. On top of that, it sat for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. So, our job is to fix it. The motor, as you can see, has already been pulled. The K-member for the suspension has already been dropped. So, this is actually a friend of mine's car. So him and his sons have actually done the majority of the work on this. So basically what they did is they cut out the bad section of frame here, and they cut out the bad section of shock tower. Now, even without the brake fluid, this is a common problem on these SN95 cars. There is a company that makes a kit to fix all of this. We're not going that route because of reasons with my friend. So we're just going to have to go ahead and fabricate everything. Not a big deal. We're going to use 1/8 inch plate for the frame rails. We're going to use 16 gauge steel for the shock tower. The plan is we're going to go around where this reinforcement is from the factory. Weld, plug weld on the bottom where we can, okay, and then perimeter weld everything. On the front's going to be the same thing. We're going to plug weld and then perimeter weld everything. A couple little interesting things happened while disassembling the car. Right about here from under the car there's a ground wire, okay, and there's a capture nut that was inside of here, and well, that broke free, so we had to wait to get the frame cut apart so that we could then take out the broken capture nut. The other thing that happened, and this kind of sucks, but on the power distribution center here, this nut that is attached to the stud that has a cable that goes to the battery, well, it's kind of frozen on here. Whether they put Loctite on it, I don't know. But the whole assembly is turning inside of here. So while we got it apart and I get in here, I'm going to have to remove this nut by whatever means necessary. Probably just going to end up grinding it down until it breaks and then we can remove it. And hopefully the electrical contact inside isn't damaged. And then of course the other thing that's got to get done is the new proportioning valve has to be put in. Master cylinder brake lines. These cars use a Hydro Boost system. All that came apart without a problem. And then the other thing, while it's apart, if we have the time and I have the ambition, we had the owner's son clean up the K-member with a wire wheel. That's got to be flipped over to do the other side, but may end up just, you know, throwing some primer and paint on here, some chassis paint, just to not put it back in looking like this. I'm not going to detail it. We're just going to more or less just hose everything down with black paint and put it back in the car. You know, it's a 98 Mustang. There's nothing special about it. So we're not going to get too crazy. All right, well, I guess the next step is let's start measuring and cutting some metal. Okay, class, today we're going to do origami with folders and scissors. Okay, no, not really. So to start making these frame rails, we need a template, right? Because we don't have anything to go by. There was no solid piece that got removed to make a template with. So, if you can make it out of cardboard, you can make it out of steel. That was a quote by Paul Sr. And if you don't know who that is, you're probably too young to be watching this channel. Anyways, so here's the deal. We have kind of a jagged edge here. We have kind of a jagged edge here. I shouldn't say jagged, I just say it's not cut straight. Not a big deal, because the piece that we're making is actually going to overlap this. So we're not really worried about that. Okay? What we're worried about is being able to weld to good steel up in the front, in the back, and up in the front here. Now the factory has a reinforcement. I don't know if you can see it. They have a they have a reinforcement here that's plug welded and just slightly perimeter welded around here. So we're going to do a little better than that with our repair. So we need to get a general idea of where we need to be. So to me, I think right about here is a good starting point as far as our length. That works for me. And then use my greasy claw marks just to get a rough idea of the height. And then from there, we'll start whittling this down. Now, you may be tempted to go to the store, buy a piece of steel, slap it on there, and call it good. But it's your car, it's your life. This is a structural piece of the car, all right? The shock tower actually comes down to about here inside the frame rail, and it's plug welded. So we're going to be doing the same thing. I'm just getting a start, because I'm not going to walk you through building every single piece of this. It's just going to make for a very long and boring video for the both of us. Now, just giving you a general idea of what I'm doing. How you apply this at home is entirely up to you. So, like I said, I'm happy with the length. I kind of want to cut a line. This part here is pretty close to the top here. This finger mark here is close to the top here. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball this, says the guy who wears bifocals. And his wife calls him Magoo. Again, if you don't know who Magoo is, or where that's from, you're probably too young to be watching. As I used to say to the barber, a little off the top on this side. All right, that's our piece. Now, what I need to do is right here is where this reinforcement is. So I actually want to, what am I going to do here? I'm actually going to come around this piece, all right, so that my new weld blends into this weld that's here, and we're not disturbing this factory reinforcement. And then when we do the bottom piece, when I do the bottom piece, this reinforcement also goes along the bottom. I have to turn around for that. But like I said, I need a starting point. Right? Every project, every great trip begins with the first step. Correct? If I hold that there. Going to go that. So I'm going to take a little off of what's going to be the bottom. Like that. So that is going to be perfect for what we need. So that's one piece done. Now, I can either make the decision to make the other two pieces to go all the way around here, or I can start working on the fender, the shock tower. I'm going to work on the shock tower because that has to go in first. Like I said, this sits inside of here when it all goes together. So, I'm going to see if I got enough here to do that. Nope. All right, so at this point, I've gone through, I've cleaned up the edges where everything's going to weld to. We did add another piece here because the replacement piece I made for the shock tower wasn't quite tall enough, so we just made this longer and gave the support piece on the other side something to grab onto. The new replacement panel is made. It's all copper welded on the back, and drops into place like that. So now what'll happen is I'll use some self-tapping screws to draw in where the gaps are, and then we will begin welding this sucker in. Alright, right then, that looks pretty proper. So what we got the line that's at the top. That's the extension for the shock tower, and then the one with the 138 plug welds in it. That is the actual frame rail itself. So at this point, we're going to start working on the bottom rail piece. Now that one, we've already got to cut it out, but what we do have to do is measure, because there are holes. Whoops. Hold on, guys, hold on. Holes on the bottom that the K-member bolts through and comes up on this side here. Sorry about the light. So that's going to be our next step. Okay, gang, so I kind of skipped past where I was making templates and just went straight to making the metal. Just because I wanted to get this car done. I had my guys in here working and just didn't have time. So at this point, what we got going on is right there, there's an 1/8 inch plate that's tied in behind the factory frame support to the frame rail, and up here it's tied into the other part of what was the original frame rail. All right, now you see all those plug welds, and then it's also stitch welded on the ends. That's plug welded to the shock tower, okay, which comes down behind it. So it's got the shock tower is reinforced. Frame is plug welded to the, the new frame rail is plug welded to the frame and to the shock tower. Now, along the bottom, there's another piece of 1/8 inch plate that's tied into the existing frame rails, just along the bottom. And then on the inside, there's a couple of crush collars for where the bolts go through for the subframe. Now, the shock tower itself, I did end up having to make out of 3 pieces. So you have one piece here, okay? You have another piece here, and then this last piece here. So that's tied into the fender well and to the frame rail. And then on the suspension side of things, there we go. Let's see if I get this light where I want it. There we go. Okay, so on the suspension side, 1/8 inch plate tied in around the factory reinforcement to the frame rail. It's kind of a weird setup, but the frame rail actually goes from the inside back here all the way up front past here and ties in there. That's the top frame rail, and it's welded to this and to the other side. Then here, this is a reinforcement, and there's one on the other side of the car too, that reinforces the shock tower And again, these holes are where the bolts come through for the K-member. So everything's welded, sanded down. I'm going to get some primer and paint on this. I'll bring it back after it's all done. Does it look like a repair was done? Yes. Do I care about this car? Not particularly. It just has to run and drive, and this is what I would call probably a little over-engineered. 1/8" plate, 16 gauge steel. It's better than what the factory used. The other side of the car will rot apart before this comes apart. So, alright, bring it back after that's all done. Alright, so there she is, all done, welded up, painted. We're ready for the motor to go back in. So, again, a little extra fabrication, but 1/8" plate, 16 gauge steel, a little bending, a little welding. Let's take a look at it from the other side. Alright, so here from the suspension side again. You see where the plug welds are and the perimeter welds are. Ain't gotta be pretty, just gotta get done. This as a kid that's gonna be driving this, it's probably gonna run into a sidewalk anyway. So, there you go. Alright gang, that's gonna wrap it up. So, everything that I needed to do is done. Everything else that needs to be done by the owner and his son. So on a scale of like, I don't know, 1 to 5 bananas, this is probably a 4. Is this something you can do at home in your driveway? Maybe. I wouldn't recommend it though. This is a structural part of the car. This is something where you want a professional who knows how to move metal, who knows how to properly weld, do this for you. This is not something where, you know, snotty welds are going to get it. But if you do want to take this on your own, just think about it logically. Think about triangulation, think about support, think about reinforcement. Don't skip on the size of the metal that you use. Okay, you know, we're taking something that's broken and bridging it, so you want a thicker piece of metal. Other than that, I have nothing else for you. If you like the video, you know what to do. Give it a thumbs up, share, subscribe. If you don't, hey, that's cool too. Well, appreciate you coming by and hanging out. So we'll see you next time.